welcome to Okon Bros. This is Eric.
And I am Michael.
This is the inaugural episode of our Titans of Travel series. And who better off to kick it off than Andy Menkes of Partnership Travel Consulting.
Welcome, Andy.
We know he's been in the game for a long time, so he's going to have a lot of insight. And we are so excited to get the show on the road.
From his compound in Florida, nonetheless.
Well, I'm looking forward to the show. I wish it could have been in person, but I'll save that for the inaugural session in a few months.
Fair enough. Yeah, we could do that too. And you could blame COVID for us doing it from here. But yes, absolutely.
And please, guys, like, subscribe, comment, and share. Really boosts our viewership, and it would be greatly appreciated.
So Andy. When I first met you, it was at the Palm in Chicago at GBTA. And we had this epic meal with all these travel managers, and you were there. And
how did you get into travel? Because that's not like something that everyone gets into. So how did you get, more along the lines of how did you get dragged into travel?
Well, it's probably not too common of a story. I was in my 20s, actually about 20, 21. And
so
I was
5 years ago, about 5, 6 years
yeah,
ago?
Thank you. Yeah, hey, the second check is in the mail for you as well, Michael.
Appreciate it.
So I was barely 20 years old, and I was a salesperson in the garment center in New York City, specifically selling buttons, buckles, and ornaments. We'll save that part for another day. And I was hanging out with a bunch of friends at lunch, because we all took a 2-hour lunch break, and said that I've always wanted to be in the airline industry. I'd give anything to get a job with an airline. And one of the guys said to me, well, a friend of mine from the National Guard is at TWA. I'll see what I can do. Next thing you know, I got myself an interview at TWA. Wow. And I remember the magic question that they asked me, which was, would I object to having my phone calls being recorded? And I answered immediately, no, I would treat every call as if I were recorded. And the man stood up and said, congratulations, you're hired.
Wow.
Yeah,
what was that position at TWA?
Oh, I started in general reservations, and
wow.
I naively believed, because it was at Two Penn Plaza in the middle of the garment center, that my shift would be somewhere like 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. To my surprise, my first shift was 4:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. with Tuesdays and Thursdays off. Wow. So I learned quickly.
That's unbelievable. From TWA, where did you go from there?
Well, I had a really good run at TWA. I will date myself, because if you look me up, you'll figure out I've been in the business 40 years. Mine was the first class to use a computer. And God. I was so fascinated by them that I decided I'm going to play with it. And I watched my supervisor log in. And then when he wasn't looking, I logged in as he. And then I created my own supervisor sign, logged him out, and I'm playing and I'm seeing things I know I have no business to see. And at one point it said message sent, and that just didn't sound right. So I logged out, got rid of the sign in, blah, 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 went out for a smoke break, came back, and there were 3 supervisors at my desk. Mr. Menkes, do you have a supervisor sign? No, I don't. Well, somebody sitting at your terminal sent a pre-formatted teletype address to the Geneva office to evacuate due to a bomb threat.
Oh my God.
That was the page I pulled up. But from that, I ended up going into the automation department. I ended up being the head of regional automation for TWA.
What does that mean?
We installed computers at very large travel agencies and corporate accounts. So that's kind of how I got some of my original contacts. And right. After 9 years there, I had a colleague who said, let's open a travel agency. So at the age of 28, I opened a travel.
Did you say no?
I should, in retrospect, I should have said no, but that's again for another story. So we did open our travel agency in New York City in the Garment Center. And my first client was Morgan Stanley. It was Priority Travel.
Okay.
And my first client was Morgan Stanley and Company. And then within 2 years, by the time I was 29, we had an office in London and Hong Kong. So I was global by the time I was 30. So I left TWA to start a travel agency.
That's incredible.
And that's how you got into travel. And I mean, once you get in, there's no getting out. That's what you just see time and time again.
Yeah, I knew I was never going back to selling buttons, buckles, and ornaments. No matter how sexy it sounded, over a dinner conversation. Yeah, I believe that once the travel industry is in your blood, it stays.
Was there any regrets leaving that industry and coming into travel, Andy?
No, I had a horrible boss who treated me poorly, and I quit. And the whole office was going to go on strike to support me. So instead, I got called back in the next day. My boss apologized in front of the crew for what he had done to me in terms of making me be his errand boy. And I basically said, "Go do something to yourself that you should do in private." I
Mm,
was more specific, and then I
sure.
quit
Wow.
because I had the job interview done with TWA. It was that quick. So
Hmm.
no, um, I would never go back now. I can tell you, I've worked for two airlines,
Hmm.
neither of whom are in business anymore. I've worked for a number of big travel management companies, most of whom are not in business anymore.
Isn't that a
Uh,
trip?
yeah, I'll tell you, the hardest part was being able to give references
Right.
if I applied for a job, because seriously, in almost every case, the company was no longer in business.
Hmm.
And I mean, today in the COVID-19 world, it's happening every single day now, where you see another company merging and other companies disappearing.
Americans laying off 20,000 people. That was front page news this morning. It's August 26th,
Yeah, I
2020.
saw that, and United had a similar announcement. And I'm sure both of you rock stars know that I only reopened my company 2 months ago. I
Right.
was working for one of the three largest TMCs, travel management companies in the world.
Hmm.
And somebody said to me, "Why the hell would you leave a steady paying job to go back into consulting?" And I said, "Well, next year is going to be my 20th anniversary. I
Wow.
founded my company in 2001.
Mhm.
Hmm.
I did my first conference 2 months after 9/11
Yep.
and succeeded. So I welcome a challenge, and I also believe that I would trade pay security for job security. It's my own
Hmm.
company. I'm back with a lot of my colleagues. I can't guarantee to my wife how much money we'll have next month or next year, but I can guarantee no one's gonna lay me off for any reason.
Right.
So
I think it's a brilliant move because I think now more than ever people need consultation in the travel world because if you feel a loss sometimes, you feel lost.
yeah, Eric, I agree. I'll share with you a quick story that helped guide me in that. It's probably folklore, but it goes something like there was a Greek shoemaker in the year 5, and he sent both of his sons to Italy to see if there's a market for shoes. Uh, the oldest son sends back a message: "No, Dad, there's no market. Everyone here is barefoot." The second son sent a message: "Let's move the factory to Italy." So it's just really how you look at it. So, yeah, I do see this as an opportunity. I'm not being opportunistic. The impact of COVID has been horrible to families, friends, the industry, etc. But Michael, to your point, I saw this as the best time for me to go back to what I've done best, which is running a global consulting firm and ideally listening to clients and offering solutions.
Let me
So
ask you a question. Oh, go ahead, Eric. Did you want
no,
to?
no, go for it.
Jumping back to your travel agency when you opened up globally, how hard was that back in you said 2001 to open up? You had an office in London, correct?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
hard was that to do?
Well, you see me smiling, so and because I'm among friends, I'll share the quick story. It was very difficult to start from scratch,
Hmm.
and the first potential client for us was, in fact, Morgan Stanley.
Hmm.
And they said, "Look, we think we'd like to do business with you guys, you folks, but we want to come by the office and kick the tires." Now, mind you, the agency was only 3 months old. We were subleasing very small space. We had 5 res agents, enough
Hmm.
room for 30. I said, "Okay, come by on Friday at 4." And they said, "Why Friday at 4?" I said, "Well, it's the end of the week. I'm near Penn Station. I'm near Grand Central Port Authority. You'll come by, you'll visit the office, and you can go home for the weekend." And
Hmm.
they said, "Great." The method to my madness was I was subleasing space from a Hasidic Jewish businessman
Hmm.
who I know on Friday leaves at 3. And with prior arrangement, he gave me the key to his office. So I moved my nameplate over to his desk in his office on the other side of the floor.
Hmm.
Sure enough, 4 o'clock, they come by. I show them the res office. I said, "Why don't you guys come to my office?" bring them down the hall. We're sitting down. I'm 28 years old,
Mhm.
and they're looking over my shoulder, and they're like, making a skeptic face. I said, "What goes on?" And they looked. They said, "You got a big family." I never took his family pictures down. So
You didn't have sitzes or anything, right?
nothing. No, not the long curly hair. So in deadpan, I said, "I got married young." So I told them the truth, and they said, "Because you told the truth, and because you were ingenious enough to try and pull this caper off, but not lie about it, you've got our business."
That is
Sometimes that's
that is the key, Eric. I'm sorry. That is the absolute key in travel. And I've learned the hard way that when BLS has messed up in the past, when I was a young gun saying, "Oh, just say the driver was there," the more you tell the truth, the more clients want to use you. It's the driver wasn't
because
there. He had the
travel
circle.
is
Right.
the whole goal of being a travel supplier is to make uneventful travel, right? So when there is an incident, you have to be 110% honest.
Right, and I've had my share of challenging limo experiences. Not with your company; those experiences were really good.
Andy, the check's in the mail.
Actually, it
Thank
says
you.
fantastic. Sorry, I couldn't read your handwriting there. And there's nothing worse than feeling you're being lied to. Okay. So, one other quick incident that goes with this, I worked for another big agency and took the global head of travel for a bank out to see the call center. And on the wall were those 3M flip chart papers. They're like 2 feet wide and 3 feet high.
Mhm.
And they're all up on the wall with the various discount codes for a corporate client's group movements.
Hmm.
She looked at me and said, "What the hell kind of technology is that?" Kind of the same shrug. I said, "No glue."
Right.
I had no answer,
Right.
and I didn't lie to her. So again, I think the key in our industry, and I've actually written articles to it, is about transparency.
Absolutely.
It's the primary currency of travel.
What's so amazing is that what we do is for people, it's by people. And I feel like, the Googles of the world and the Travelocities of the world, they try and push automation. And I feel like automation is great on paper. But then when it actually goes into action, the type of travel that we help facilitate is nuanced. And you can't do it by pressing a button. And I just feel like that's why Andy Menkes exists, is because it's so nuanced.
It is. And Eric, I was thinking about this industry as you were saying that. The airlines have an ATC system. As antiquated as it is, they do have controllers that control airplanes on the ground, in the air,
Exactly.
landing and takeoff. Hotels don't have to worry about what time the guest gets in. If anything, they can sell the room twice. Car rental companies, hey, as long as the car is on the lot, go have a nice day. In your industry, you're subject to traffic,
Yep.
weather,
Yep.
flat tires, you name it.
There
New
are
York
five.
City, LA
And
traffic.
the most important thing of all is the chemistry between the passenger and the driver.
There are
Yeah.
literally
So
5,000 things that can
that
go wrong for one reservation. And we cringe when someone has to make multiple changes to an itinerary because someone will press a 2 instead of a 3. It happens. Someone will
the
say,
driver's gonna get stuck behind a dumpster.
Yeah.
right,
But
there are
but
so many
but
variables.
yeah.
People don't
Yeah.
understand.
And when you try and compare ground travel to any other type of travel, it's no contest.
Oh, I
Yeah,
agree. I'm glad I'm not on your side of the industry.
it's hard. It
Yeah, I
really
mean,
is hard.
we were born into it, so we didn't really have a choice.
That
Right,
helps.
right.
Well, I do know your mom was on a panel with me last week, and one of her greatest stories was an executive from a Hollywood studio was leaving Midtown Manhattan for a flight, and traffic was snarled. The Pope was in town,
Yeah.
and he had his he screamed at the driver, "Can't you do something?" The driver said, "The Pope's in town." He said, "Make a phone call." Apparently, he had his admin call your mom, CEO of
Mhm.
the company, and say, "Call the Vatican,
Mhm.
reroute the traffic."
Yep. Yep.
Yes,
You Yes.
that
I
happened, but that still happens today.
It-
that's par for the course.
When I
and you guys didn't know I
yeah.
was going to bring up the story, so this is not a can. Trust me, this
No.
is
No.
not a canned discussion.
No. I mean, we didn't nothing was planned
Right.
in our interviews, we don't plan anything. I read off your LinkedIn bio and then we go.
Right.
Good.
our what we people say, like, do you have questions, comments, what could I plan for? I say plan like we're sitting, like what I said when I opened this. We're sitting at the Palm in a random city. We've never met each other. I want to know about you. I want to know how you got into your position. I want to know who taught you the lessons you learned, the best lessons you learned.
Sure.
And that's what this podcast is about. I didn't know much about you, Andy. I knew that you were in travel. I knew you were a consultant. I knew you owned this firm. But
So
I didn't know you worked at TWA. That's incredible.
what I want to know, what does PTC do? Partnership Travel Consulting. What
Well,
what
first
is
of all,
what does that mean?
how did you
Yeah.
get to that? Did you just jump from that travel agency to your current company?
No, and I think I'll answer in the order that the questions were posed. The name Partnership Travel Consulting was one that I came up with because my original travel agency back when I was in my 20s was Priority Travel. I already had the PT. And
Right.
I thought, you know what? I somehow want to memorialize that, even if it's just me that knows it. So now you know it. Okay, because I had original, PT, and they said, "Where'd you come up with the name?" I said, "What's the best wait list to have?" Priority wait list. So that's where I came up with the name.
I
Awesome.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the current company, which I founded 19 years ago, was as a result of my just before then having worked for a bank. I was the global head of travel for a bank.
Wow.
Did some pretty cool things, including a direct connect with British Airways and JetBlue.
Very cool.
I'm sure you've read up on that. But to tie how I got into consulting, my wife and I were coming back from our vacation in Hawaii, and we were in the front of the plane. This gentleman gets on with his wife and two daughters, and each has a T-shirt from a different island in Hawaii. So there's no one else in first class but us. I said to him, "So have you been to all those islands?" He said, "Yeah, we have." I said, "How long have you been away?" He said, "4 weeks."
Oh my God.
I said, "What do you do for a living?" He said, "I'm a consultant." The bells went off.
The light bulb.
I said to Cindy, I'm going to be a consultant. So when I came back to work, I said to my boss, I have good news and bad news. He said, "What's the bad news?" I said, "I quit." He said,
Yeah.
"Well, then what's the good news?" I said, "You could be my first client. I'll do your global travel agency bid." So, Eric, Michael, tying that to what we do, we listen to corporate travel buyers
Mhm.
to understand what their current program looks like, their travel program, airline, hotel, ground transportation, meetings, payment system, policy, and then guide them towards options to improve it. So I came up with an acronym ROI. No, that's not original. We all know it's return on investment, but
Right.
I've twisted it. It's reduce, optimize, improve.
That's love it.
Awesome.
I
That's
can take
great.
any aspect of a travel program and describe ways for almost any category to reduce, optimize, or improve the program. So that's what we do. We come up with suggestions after listening. You don't write a script until you do the MRI, and then work with the client to implement the best integrated systems, not for today, but at least for the next 3 years. 5 years is a stretch. I don't care what anyone says.
Mhm.
Look back 5 years as to how much has changed,
Yep.
the new entrants, the losses, the mergers, etc. I'm fine with a 3 year window. 5 year TMC agreement, but 3 year window in terms of forecasting.
Mhm. That's really interesting because the car contracts, I mean, the contracts go 5-10 years. There's contracts we have that are 10 years old. We're still charging the rates from the early 2000s. It is what it is. It's the last thing on people's minds. It's like, if the car service is
We
good,
actually
keep
at
it.
at the beginning of COVID, we got, I guess, kind of lucky where everyone's like, you know what, let's do the car service RFP,
Yeah.
and we had a huge rush in March and April of like, okay, let's wrap it up, and they were wrapping up. They're like, okay, give us the answers in 3 days. We're gonna wrap this up in 2 weeks, and we're like, okay, and like that was a silver lining a little bit of COVID, that RFPs that were just lingering for 9 months, 13 months, 15 months, all of a sudden they're like, okay, we have time
Wrap it
now.
up. Right. Right.
Yeah, and what comes to my mind is there are certain areas of travel that I don't believe should be designed around an RFP. All right, and I'll tell you one of them as an example is car rental. I'll stick with ground transportation and come back to your particular vertical. I had a client come to me that said, "Hey, we want to go out for bid on car rental. Can you run the bid for us?" I said, yeah, of course I could. It would be a waste of your money. Now, what consultant turns down a gig like that? I said, well, um, let me look at your data and see if I'm right. And sure enough, I was. They were spending six figures in refueling. I said, if you're looking to save money, a car rental RFP might save you $1 a day.
Wow.
That doesn't equate to what you're wasting in refueling charges, which is employees, for whatever their reason, and I've had plenty, don't refuel the car before they return it and pay $10 a gallon.
Mhm.
So that's one area. I would say also in your vertical, I'd rather see an MSA than RFP, a master services agreement
Mhm.
that holds the ground transportation provider to some key performance indicators, service level agreement, etc. And I'd run the best three of you in parallel.
That's
That to
brilliant.
me has
Yeah.
a lot more value than how well can you answer a written question that you've already answered 110 times this year. Does that really tell them how reliable, how clean, how safe, how insured? I'm doing a commercial, but I'm answering your question.
It's the
Uh,
No,
why
the absolute truth.
why throw away the money or the time on an RFP? It's not an SAT exam, and if it were, have somebody else do it for you.
I guess the idea of an RFP is to weed out is they choose, right, the top, 3 or 4 global companies or the top 5 global companies
or the regional companies.
or the right, exactly.
There's other there's other, questions to the answer of who's involved in an
Well,
RFP,
then
but
pre-qualify the players.
right.
Right. I gotta tell you, we had an RFP last year. I'm not gonna name the client, and we came in. This is a big user of car. This is like a gold standard in car service that you want to get this account, and we literally cold called them. We heard there was an RFP going, and we cold called, and they brought us in. The RFP was over. It was done, or like they were in the process of it. And we've been to, we've contacted people, and they're like, "Oh, we're in the middle of an RFP. We can't change it." Oh, all right, that's fine. Please,
We were the 36th entrant.
36 entrant, and within 6 months, we were fighting for number 2 because we gave a kick-ass presentation. I mean, we really we nailed it. It was my mom, my brother, and I, and on this guy Jim that we work with, and we flew out to where their headquarters are, and we met with them, and we met them at GBTA, and we sat down for lunch with them, and we talked about everything but business because that's what it is to sell. Yes,
Because like we say all the time, everybody's got the same cars, everybody's got the same drivers, just like everyone's got the same reservation system, everyone's got the same airplanes, it's all the same stuff. So what makes you different
and
as a
we
supplier?
and as a family-owned operation, I'm not trying to sell the company here, but like the idea of family-owned, we're there for you for every step of the way because shit's gonna happen. Issues do happen every day,
It
all
does.
the time.
Yeah, and I'll share with you another anecdote. I do have plenty of them, but only those that I think are relevant. On the issue of RFP, I worked for a number of very large agencies. Excuse me, and we were responding to an RFP for a very, very large pharmaceutical company who at the time was using probably 25 to 30 different agencies.
Yeah.
And I know what goes on the client side when the RFP comes in because I saw it when I worked for the bank. They go right to whatever the section number is, which is finance. They don't read the other stuff.
Yep.
Right.
So I had the idea, and because I was the regional VP, I could do what I wanted. For the finance section, I had a color glossy photo of a particular pill. And it said, if you can charge $90 for a pill, we'd like $5 a ticket. Yeah,
Did it
yes,
work?
we won the account. Yeah.
Yeah, of course
Yeah.
you did. Of course.
I got to tell you
Go
real
ahead,
quick,
Mike. Go ahead. I know what you were going to say.
Well, I don't know if you're going to know this one, but when we this is when I first started. This is like back in 2000, like 99, 2000. I was working at the company all throughout the 90s, but there was an RFP for a massive studio. And
It was when they first started doing RFPs for
right
car.
in like the late 90s, right? Mid
Right.
to late 90s. And I was working at the company like on and off when I wasn't in school. And I looked at this RFP and they made, you're probably gonna know who it is. I don't want to say who it is because we don't reveal clients.
Don't.
Yeah, but they made it like like
a nursery rhyme.
a fairy tale.
Yeah.
They made my mom and dad's story of creating BLS like a fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Phyllis Okon who grew up
Right.
as a teacher. And I'm reading it. I'm like, my God, this is brilliant. and we won the RFP, and they've
Is
been
it? Yeah.
clients for 30 plus years.
You have to be genuine. You have
That's
to be
Yes.
exactly
genuine.
right. And if it's a cut and paste job, the client will see right through you. If it's a cut and paste job, I liken it to screenwriting. I know this is so off base, but when I write a screenplay or when I read a screenplay, there's a guy who writes screenplays. His name escapes me. He wrote the new Predator movie. He wrote he was in the original movie Predator. He directed Iron Man 3. Sean Black.
Okay.
When he writes screenplays, he does these little winks at the thing, like saying, there's $20 million sitting on the table, or there's this big massive house worth $100 million. The type of house I'm going to buy once this movie gets sold.
Right.
So like he does these little winks
You have
to
to
the
break.
reader that breaks the reader and go, oh my God, this guy's talking to me. He's talking to the audience, and he sells scripts like that. And I write like that too. And I instilled that in our team when we're doing RFPs. So like when you're saying like,
You
what's your
have to break.
technology
You
like?
have to break the fourth wall.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
You got to be a little Deadpool-ish and break the fourth wall.
And let me tell you a little bit about cut and paste. We've done dozens upon dozens of RFPs over the years, mostly TMC bids. And as you folks know, if you look at the BTN Corporate Travel 100, 3 TMCs, 1 HRG was independent, 4 had 98 out of the 100 in any given year. Oh, yes, of course, the landscapers are here. I'll do my best.
Landscapers only work in the apocalypse. Landscapers and pool people.
Cindy said to me, close your doors because the dog's going to bark at the landscapers. I said, nah, I'm not
That's
worried.
fine. Yes.
Anyway, so because we do so many RFPs, the TMCs kind of got used to knowing where the questions were, having their answers handy, so they could almost reuse the prior RFP and just slap the answers in. So just to mix it up and make sure they were reading my RFPs, we changed the ordering of the questions. I can't tell you how many answers came in that did not tie to that question number.
Yep. They don't read. Yeah, 100%.
Goes right to pricing.
Mhm.
That's it. But that goes into the question is
No, but Eric, the idea is that they tricked the company.
Right. No. I hear that. So does that mean that there needs to be a reinvention of the RFP? Is that what you're trying to do?
No, not necessarily. Well, it depends. For hotel RFP, yes. On a TMC side, the way we've always handled it is when the RFPs come in, I have 2 teams reviewing them. Team A, which I sit on, only looks at the financial offering, none of the other stuff.
Mhm.
Team B, of which there's a minimum of 3, ideally 5 consultants, reads all of the RFP responses, but has no idea as to the pricing. So here's the logic.
Interesting.
If Eric is reviewing the TMC grid of questions and answers, and they know TMC A offered $1 million signing bonus, TMC B offered $5 million, it may influence how you score. Because you may think, well, the one that only offered $5 has no chance of prevailing, so I'm going to skip through it. So I separate church and state by not having the same group of consultants have visibility to finance or questions. They're in 2 different firewalls. When they're done, they can see the other side. So no, I don't want to reinvent the TMC RFP. Others have written articles to it, and here's my view. I may be giving away some trade secrets, but that's what you guys bring out. I insist, as a matter of a business practice, that whoever prevails as the TMC in a bid, their RFP response is attached to the contract as an exhibit. And we tell them that ahead of time. So salesperson, caveat emptor, if you're going to put in responses that you haven't checked with operations, finance, account management, or otherwise, understand you're creating enforceable contract terms in your answers. That improves the response process. So we use the RFP to help those on the client side who don't know the brand names out there as to what the capabilities are. Because if you do it just on brand recognition, some of the TMCs would never make the first cut because they're not household names, because they're not retail. So the RFP still belongs on the TMC side, in my view, even though 3 companies, Amex, BCD, CWT, have 98 of the 100 CT 100, but there's another 100,000 out there that are mixed up amongst other very strong global and regional players. So I say the RFP stays.
Mhm.
I would certainly change the model for hotel. I wouldn't waste my time on RFPs for ground transportation.
S-
I'd rather see pre-qualify the bidder pool based on, as you know, years in business, insurance, references, not how well you answer a question that doesn't really tie to the reliability or the performance of your company.
So what would you change about hotels?
Well, don't get me started. I did an article on that RFP should be RIP. There's a bunch of really dumb questions in the RFP. My favorite is how far away from the local police station is your hotel? If it were Mayberry or Petticoat Junction, yeah, I'm dating myself, then there's a logic in how quickly can the police get to your building. It has no value. My view is that the hotels should be able to push out in a commonly used database all of the property info. Then the buyer needs only negotiate the terms,
Mhm.
the price. Don't make them answer 196 questions that they answered last year. And as long as the building hasn't been sold or hasn't gone through major renovations, then 90% of the 200 questions have the same answers last year. It's
Right.
creating work for third party consultants. We're a third party consultant. Um, I try to avoid hotel RFPs and instead, forgive me, talk about optimizing, reducing the number of hotels in the program, and improving the traveler experience. That to me makes more sense than putting out SAT questions every year,
Why is
especially this year.
why do they go for hotel RFPs every single year?
It feels good.
What? Really? There's like a hotel
So there's
RFP
there's no
season.
good reason.
Remember, I said transparency is our best currency. That's what was in my head, and that's what I said. I'll elaborate on it. If I'm in procurement and I've been doing this for a few years, or I'm new to procurement, or I'm new to the company, I'm going to want to establish a baseline and some credibility.
Mhm.
An RFP has some credibility. Like, look what I've done. I've put together. I invited 1,000 hotels. I selected 600. We'll probably only use 200, but I've selected 600.
Mhm.
And based on the hotels that I've selected, my average daily rate is going to go from 250 a night to 220 a night. Therefore, I've got a 12% savings. That's math. It's not reality.
Mhm.
Here's the reality, Michael.
Right.
Mathematically, and this is for the last decade and a half, barely 50% of all corporate hotel bookings go through the approved TMC. So my recommendation is instead of continuing to focus via RFP on the half of the business you control, go to the C level, make the business case why you need to know where every employee is staying, not every other employee. And then go back to your hotel properties and say, I can now double my volume in LA, New York, Chicago. And then say, let's take New York City, where I have 52 hotels and I'm going to double my volume. I'm going to take the 52 down to 22. But in exchange for doing that, Michael and Eric, what better deal can you give my travelers if I truly make you one of the preferred,
Mhm.
if I improve hotel attachment, if I communicate with my travelers on the value of a preferred hotel? To me, that type of process has way more value than pushing out an Excel spreadsheet for somebody to, a hotel person, of which
Right.
there are so few left, respond to irrelevant questions if they've answered them 12 months ago.
Right. Right.
That to me is the better use of time.
Andy, what happens? Let's say you have your list of hotels that you're gonna say for this is good for this company, the airlines, the car rental, and the car service. And I'm gonna stick with our industry because I don't know what issues occur in hotels, but with the car service, let's say you vouch for BLS and two other global providers for argument's sake, and
Mm.
we're selected. And the first five rides are just messed up, right? The phone wasn't picked up in time. They sent the wrong driver. The phone number didn't match up to the driver's car.
The wrong pickup was entered.
The
Right.
wrong pickup was. It's just it's always I always call it the transition period of any new company that comes on with us. We always say there's going to be a transition. This is dating. We have to learn what you like. You have to learn how we operate, and we will mesh together. But you have to give us a shot. And everyone always does. There's only been maybe like one or two companies over the last 20 years that I've been doing this that have said, we're not using you. It's just not going to work out. And they go back to their previous vendor or whatever the case. If you vouch for someone and they kind of mess up, like how does the company come back to you and go like, how dare you bring on a company like this to us? Like they're not good. Yeah. How do you take that credit? Do you go back to the car service and go, you guys are going to lose this? What are you doing? Or is the relationship now with us and that corporation where we have to fix it with them? Like, how do you deal with that?
My answer is going to be a bit shorter than the question, but I will tie it together.
Yeah.
As a matter of principle, we don't recommend a particular supplier when we're running a bid.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And we're able to do that because of the independence in that PTC does not take on engagements with the supplier community. We don't have airlines, hotels, TMCs, car service companies, or otherwise as clients. Therefore, we're neutral.
Gotcha.
But because we're being paid to help the company select the right vendors, and I hate the word vendor. I did that in my acceptance speech at BTN. A vendor sells fruit from a push cart. Your suppliers, your partners, get rid of that frickin' vendor word.
It's
Yeah.
genius.
Yeah.
Genius.
So what we've come up with is we do scorecards. So the first scorecard is done by an independent team of PTC on the RP responses.
Mm-hmm.
When I present that scorecard back to the client, I don't give the agency name. I say TMC A, B, C, D. Why? Because
Awesome.
if they see the name, there's going to be a degree of bias. So what we try to do is make the decision as unemotional as possible,
Love it.
as
Yeah.
apolitical as possible, but as mathematically scientific as can be done. So step one is the scorecard that we do. Then the client has to do a scorecard. And then we compare the scorecards. From that, we narrow down the finalists. Then we bring the finalists in person. These days, it's going to be remote,
Sure.
but they present. And that's where we guide the client. And I'm going to pound the desk. Don't pick the best goddamn PowerPoint presentation. This is not Hollywood. That's not an audition. Pick the best partner. So we'll do a second scorecard for the in-person presentations. I guide the client towards how to fill out the scorecard. I don't do one for exactly the same reason, but I will dispel the bullshit. So when a TMC is showing this really cool reporting tool, I will probably in the room, if I think they're being disingenuous, say, well, doesn't that software belong to? It's a third party. Yes, it does. So I like to say I have an MBA in BS, and I'll help the client. I'll help the client cut through that. So now we're down to your original, magical question, Michael, which is great. We've gone through the process. We've helped them pick the winner.
Mm-hmm.
How do I avoid it? Spilling back on us or getting a black eye, because I'm part of that very same team.
Right.
And the answer is you lower the expectations. There's a story about a diner in the Midwest that on the menu it says, if a service doesn't live up to your expectations, lower your expectations.
That's
We use that all
that's
the time.
George Carlin.
It's great. Thank you.
My
Yeah.
needs aren't being met. My
Yeah.
needs aren't
Right.
being met.
Drop
Drop
some
some of your needs.
Right. So what we'll do is we'll let the client know their flawless implementation is an oxymoron. It's not going to happen. All right. It'll be worse than your incumbent, but your incumbent has had 12 years to perfect their act.
Right.
Let's recognize that there's going to be issues,
Mm-hmm.
especially because this is an industry where the provider doesn't have total control over the experience. You have some control. You can't control the New Jersey Turnpike, the Pope coming into town, etc. So we avoid the challenges that you'll get internally. Why did you switch suppliers? We were really happy with the one we had. You know what? Look back in a year and tell me if I made a mistake. So it's really having the client understand that there is a cost of change, there is a pain of change. No different when I redid my kitchen. A lot of dust, big mess, a lot of noise. I don't talk about it anymore. It's
Right.
how much better the experience is.
Amazing.
So get past the transaction and follow the flow of the improvement, because it's an investment in improvement. It's
Yeah.
not a cost of change.
Yes,
That
that was amazing.
I
I
think my
mean,
answer was as long as the question, so
No,
it worked out.
it was great. And
it worked out great, and I feel like you're doing a real service to corporations with how you run your business because I think the cream will rise to the top, and the best vendor will definitely win when you run an RFP that way.
Yeah, and if they don't, and I've had it happen where we were doing the scorecards, and I would hear from one of the folks on the client side, I like TMC number 2. I like their presentation. I said, which one? What was number 2? She didn't even know the name of the TMC. She just remembered the presentation. I said, so you like the presentation? Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe your marketing department can hire them to do your PowerPoints. We're picking a travel services provider. Of this presentation team, 4 out of the 5 will never interface with your company again.
Mhm.
So you're picking what's behind door number 2 without even seeing the curtain being open. The scorecard is the best way to prevent hearing from the worst person in any company, and that's the VP of hindsight. You're gonna, yeah. These are Menkesisms. You're
I
gonna,
mean,
You should write a book.
they make perfect sense.
You should
you
write,
get the
yeah.
visual, which is someone somewhere's going to second guess the process. That's why when we run the RFP, we do it through an online tool that the client has access to 24/7. I don't let the TMCs email us RFP responses. There's too much risk in that.
Mhm.
We also have the TMC bring flash drive copies of their presentation the day of the presentation too. One
Mhm.
we hold, one I give to the client. So no matter what happens, there's 100% transparency of every step of the way. Because at some point, that VP of hindsight is going to question, how did you choose the bidder pool? Why did you eliminate my brother-in-law's company? Okay.
Yep.
Why couldn't you just work things out? There's a million questions you'll get asked. But as long as you have a structured process that's auditable and the client owns the process, not the consultant, it will prevail the test of time because the decision was made using science, not emotion.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing. I've heard you talk about the financial industry. Has that been your primary focus over? You said some pharmaceutical and finance. Has that been your primary focus over the last 20+ years?
No, it hasn't. I get asked that just like I've been told, well, you're going to have to customize your RP for our industry. Well, unless you're in row 1, every person sitting in front of you looks the same from the back of their head. You don't know what industry. I don't dispute that there are nuances. Pharma has some unique regulatory requirements to document, the travel procurement process. We don't focus in any particular vertical, Michael. I can tell you, we've had companies with spend as low as $1 million
Mhm.
to those with spend in the hundreds of millions.
Mhm.
The primary protocols, it's not easy to say, the primary protocols that we put into place are the same, large or small.
Mhm.
The differences in the detail in terms of the spend numbers, the number of countries, the impact of the policy,
Mhm.
the amount of time required to transition TMCs, because I can tell
Mhm.
you, mathematically, in the majority of cases where we've done a TMC RFP, the client changed TMCs.
Mhm. It's
Okay.
amazing. Yeah.
So we've done pharma, medical, banking, advertising, entertainment,
Mhm.
broadcast, manufacturing,
Mhm.
you name it. There, I took a look of the CT 100. I hope this doesn't sound like a commercial. 32, not quite a third, have been clients of ours.
Very
So if you
nice.
look at that list, they're in all kinds of verticals.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it may cause bleeding out of the ears, right? Like a drug commercial. It
Yeah.
may cause bleeding out of the ears, and you won't be able to sleep at night.
Well, all right, here you go. So the key, I guess, to this whole RFP thing is what's the purpose of it? If it's to justify and document why you stayed with the incumbent, don't do it. I had a company reach out to me and say, I want to hire you to do an RFP for agency. I said, okay. How long have you been with the agency? Well, it's been 10 years. We have no intention of changing. We just want to see what the prices are
Yep.
Andy, I got to tell you that we've done dozens of RFPs, each year, right? And half of them, you just don't win because all they're trying to do is lower the price for their current vendors. Say, well, listen, we went to market,
Right.
and now instead of paying $100 for an airport transfer, well, these companies want to do it for 60, and you'll lose them, and then it really stings you when the companies that you work with for the last 20, 30 years that you've provided good service for, that you take care of,
Yeah,
they
it's
do
rough.
it to you. There are times where we had to stand our ground saying, if you have to go with the other companies, we understand we can't go for these rates. It'll put us out of business. And the company either stays or they don't, or they bring on that new vendor for the cheap rates. But
Yes, right. I'll tie two things together. So in that one particular case where the procurement person was honest and said, we have no intention of changing.
yeah,
We just want to hire PTC to run our bids so that we can go back to the incumbent and get better pricing. I said, what you're really talking about is not an RFP, it's incumbent squeezing.
yep,
I don't want to be a participant in it. I would rather not take your money because the TMCs rely on PTC to run an honest bid. An honest bid means every qualified entity will have a chance to bid. Every bid will be stacked up against your competition in a neutral playing field. What you're asking me to do uh, is it's fraud. I just won't do it. Now, Michael, on the subject of pricing, I've had people come to me and say, I looked at your fees and you're way more expensive than another bidder. And I've given two answers. One is I'm $2 more per minute than the psychic hotline. How do you want to spend your money? And the other is there's a great expression: price, service, quality.
mm-hmm.
Pick any two.
Right.
You'll always find a lower bidder.
100%.
You get what you pay for.
I,
So
I hate doing that. Like I hate being scammed like that too, where we get invited to a massive RFP, right? And we're like getting the champagne ready, like we're ready to pop the champagne, and then you don't get it. And because when you get friendly with the procurement people and the analysts and everything, saying, yeah, any reason why we didn't get it? And they go, listen, they stayed with their current vendor. It's like, so why even bother going to RFP? And so we ice the champagne some more for the next time.
Listen,
But
yeah,
it's the nature of the beast.
it's annoying.
It's the nature of travel.
it's like Charlie Brown kicking that football.
Yes. Damn, man, you should write a book, man.
I've been told that
You
I'd
really
have to learn
should.
I'd have to learn from Phyllis.
Or
I'm sure a lot of work goes into it.
start a podcast. You're good at those webinars, I must say.
Well, thanks.
It was a pleasure.
I don't know how many people would believe some of the stuff in the book because quite a bit is unbelievable.
I think with that, we will wrap it up. We
All right.
appreciate you coming on, Andy.
Thanks for inviting me.
And did you have fun?
Great.
You like that?
I really did. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
love the fact that there's no rehearsal, no prep. Just here's the link, put on your headset and get ready for a chat.
That's our style.
Great.
Where can people find you?
Our website is Partnership TC. T like travel, C like consulting. Partnershiptc.com. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Andy, thanks for coming on, man. That was fun.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Thanks, Andy.
Talk to you guys soon.
Like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Andy, hang on one second. We're going to sign off.
Yeah, I'm going to end the show right now. Hold on.